Hi there, welcome to this week's video, and it's the first Sunday in Advent, so a series for the next 4 weeks. I'm not going to follow any of the traditional Advent patterns. For the Advent this year, I want to explore one of the great Bible passages, the one that above all talks about the mystery of the Incarnation, as it's often titled in carol services. It's the passage we more widely and formally call the Prologue, but people of a certain generation must not think about Frankie Howard and Up Pompeii when I say the Prologue. It's the prologue to the Gospel according to John, the first 18 verses of that wonderful fourth Gospel, in which the evangelist introduces many of the themes of his Gospel in the context of Jesus' birth. There are so many ways we could explore this passage, for there are so many riches there. A friend of mine wrote his PhD on it, and I could easily imagine preaching every Sunday for a year on these verses. But I'm going to resist that temptation. This is just an Advent series, and one way of exploring the prologue over the 4 Sundays of Advent is to take a particular strand in it about Jesus' relationships. So we shall look first of all at Jesus' relationship with his Father, and in other weeks at his relationships with Moses, with John the Baptist, and with human beings generally. So let's read that famous passage. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of the world. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him. He cried out, saying, "This is the one I spoke about when I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me.' Out of his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in the closest relationship with the Father, has made him known." I'm not the most avid television watcher, but I did set our satellite box to record Monday night's quiz programmes on BBC Two. Mastermind, Only Connect, and then the one that goes right back to my childhood, University Challenge. That was something we used to watch as a family on Sunday lunchtimes, University Challenge and Thunderbirds. For some reason, I still remember one starter question from one of those series when I was a child, and it was this: which two books of the Bible begin with the same three words in English? Now, leaving aside the awkward issue of differing translations, the answer they wanted was Genesis and John's Gospel, both starting with the words, "in the beginning." And that's where we're going today, to the beginning, to that relationship between Jesus and the Father that existed before creation and led to creation. I follow those scholars who say that the inner relationships of the Trinity are demonstrated in their actions towards human beings and the world. In the case of the Incarnation, they tell us something about why Jesus came, and that's what we're going to explore today. 3 reasons we find in Jesus' relationship with the Father that explain the reasons for the Incarnation. We're finding those 3 reasons in the first 5 verses of the reading. The first of the 3 themes is unity. In verses 1 and 2, unity. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Note those words, with God, was God, and with God in the beginning. The Word, that is Jesus, and the Father are united in fellowship and very nature. Theirs is a perfect and pure unity of relationship. They are one in heart, mind, and spirit. It is this inner experience of unity that Jesus comes to bring at the Incarnation. It is the knowledge that human relationships with God, with each other, and creation are broken that leads him to come. These are not what was intended. Humankind was made in the image of God, the one God in 3 persons who is unity. But sin has distorted and destroyed all those relationships. So when Jesus comes, his is a mission of reconciliation. He wants human beings, at one with the Godhead again. He wants human beings reconciled to each other. He wants the alienation of human beings from the creation healed. But to bring this unity will involve a great cost. It will take him from Bethlehem to Calvary, from the manger to the cross. It makes me think of a Graham Kendrick Christmas song, perhaps some of you know it, "Thorns in the Straw," where he imagines Mary seeing the thorns for Jesus' crown of thorns in the straw of the manger. Therefore, as Christians, we remember our need to draw ever closer to our God as we receive the forgiveness of our sins. We remember our need to work for unity with one another, putting right our broken relationships and finding reconciliation with each other. We remember that our reconciliation with one another is one of the deeds that witnesses to our preaching about reconciliation with God. And we remember our calling to bind up the wounds of the creation, not out of the desperation many have over things like climate change, but in the Christian hope of the God who is making all things new. So let's remember this Advent that the unity of Father and Son leads to Jesus' mission to bring unity. And just as that was costly for him, let us be prepared to pay a cost to proclaim and demonstrate Christ's nature and message of unity to the world. The second theme is love. Verse 3. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. Jesus is the Father's agent in creation. But what's that got to do with love? Here's what. Let me ask you a question that the famous 20th century Swiss theologian Karl Barth asked. Was it necessary for God to create? Barth answered that question with the word yes, and so do I. Here's why. It's certainly true that love between people can be personal and exclusive, but it's never private. There's a social consequence. If two people love each other exclusively, but it never touches others for good, how is it so very different from mutual self-indulgence? Take marriage as an example. The most common way in which a married couple express this love they have for each other outwardly is if and when they are able to have children. Their personal and exclusive love reaches out in a creative act, and they sacrificially love their children. Now, of course, I know that many couples, don't want children immediately, and others sadly cannot have children at all. So one of the things I do when I prepare a couple for marriage is I challenge them to show the love they have wonderfully discovered between themselves in service of others. Can they do something together in their community? Is there a cause they could support? I think something like that has happened on a cosmic spiritual scale in the Godhead. Such is the love between the members of the Trinity that it has to be expressed beyond them. The Father creates through the Son and in the power of the Spirit. A universe is created beyond the Godhead for the Godhead to love. And it's out of this love at the heart of God that Jesus comes in the Incarnation. Seeing the brokenness and lack of unity that I talked about in the first point, it is his very nature of love that brings him to earth. Remember that most basic of all statements about God in the Bible is found in the first letter of John. God is love. What I'm talking about here is what Christina Rossetti wrote about in one of her famous Christmas carols. Love came down at Christmas, love all lovely, love divine. Love was born at Christmas, star and angels gave the sign. Worship we the Godhead, love incarnate, love divine. Worship we our Jesus, but wherewith for sacred sign? You see, there it is. Jesus comes in love because the very nature of the Godhead is love. And Rossetti also tells us what the only fitting response is in the last verse. Love shall be our token. Love be yours and love be mine. Love to God and all the world. Love for plea and gift and sign. If the Incarnation is about the love at the heart of the Godhead coming to us in Jesus, then our response is love to God and all the world, in Rossetti's words. Love God and love our neighbour, as Jesus was to say the two greatest commandments were. Even the new commandment he gave was about love. Love one another as I have loved you. Howard Thurman, who was a great influence on Martin Luther King, wrote a short poem called The Work of Christmas, and it expresses our love response to God's love in the Incarnation. It's just a short poem, and this is what it says. When the song of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, When the shepherds are back with their flock, the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among others, to make music in the heart. So firstly, unity. Secondly, love. The third thing we find in that relationship between Jesus and the Father that plays out in the Incarnation is light. Verses 4 and 5. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. At the heart of God's life is light, purity, wholeness, righteousness, hope. All these things are light. But we have a world of darkness, brokenness, sin, injustice, despair. So when Jesus brings the very inner character of God to earth in the Incarnation, he comes as light. He comes as the light of the world who steps down into darkness, as Tim Hughes wrote. Wherever we experience darkness, Jesus comes to shed his light. It may be the darkness when we know ourselves to be a moral failure, but the light of Jesus' 70 times 7 forgiving love draws us back to him again. It may be the wounds we carry through life that leave us with low self-worth or even a sense of self-loathing, but the hope found in Jesus gives us strength to carry on. It may be that a particular issue of injustice in the world affects us, and we get involved with campaigning, but nothing seems to change for the better. I listened to a talk recently by a Christian journalist whose life work it is to expose corruption in the church. But for her troubles, she has suffered attacks and false accusations from parts of the Christian community. She has carried a heavy load. She has been tempted to give up. But the light of Jesus keeps her persevering for justice in the darkness. Or maybe it's bereavement. 6 years ago, when my father died, I said that a light had gone out of my life. He had modelled for me so much of what it meant to live with integrity as a Christian man in the world. Yes, when he died, he was only 2 months shy of his 90th birthday. He had, quote, had a good innings. Yes, Alzheimer's disease had taken his true personality before death took his body, and you could say it was a merciful release. But for all those things, you know what grief is like. The logical answers don't remove the pain. Dad died on the 1st of August. It was not until Advent that year and reading John chapter 1 that I felt a sense of hope. And it was verse 5. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome. Those words made sense of things for me. I realized that Jesus gave just enough light in the darkness to take me forward in hope. So let's begin this Advent with a sense of hope. The relationship between Jesus and his Father may seem like highfalutin, brain-bending stuff, but at its heart are characteristics that stretch out from the inner life of God to us through the incarnation of Jesus. May it be that unity, love, and light give each of us strength and hope. Well, God bless you all, and I'll be back next week with a look at another of the Jesus relationships in the prologue to John's Gospel. Hope to see you then. Bye-bye for now.